Enotria, the last song. I'm really
Dave,
excited for this.
you're really excited about this. Okay.
You
I was
thought I was gonna crap on this, huh?
I thought you were gonna crap on it in a certain different aspects. So let me just pull up the trailer. We're kind of just talking about it real quick, but go ahead and describe it to the audience, Dave.
Okay, so if you are just listening, what we are taking a look at right now is you are looking at a character that is kind of strung up on a tree. And if you're a Souls player, you knew that this was a Souls like about 4 seconds into this trailer. This is just like quintessential Souls lore
Mhm.
happening right now. And you're also kind of seeing this the thing that's lacking is, guys, we're not seeing like a lot of like gameplay,
Mhm.
but I think what we're seeing right now is just an extension of how great the lore of this game is going to be, and I'm super super excited for it. And that was one of the biggest things right there. Is if you're just listening, we saw a scene where the character is wearing a mask and then instantly changes his mask, and we're going to talk about in a couple minutes why that's important. But I think the idea behind the game is really really creative. And then of course they had to throw in the quintessential super large beast that you need to fight and to end out the trailer. And I think I'm super excited for it. I am super super excited for it. I feel like maybe Adam is not super excited for this game. Is that correct?
I'm not super excited about this game. But this one comes out June 21st. It's made by Jyamma Games. Is that how you say it?
Yes, correct. So
So I want to say one thing about that final boss. You know what that final boss looks like?
what?
One of the bosses from Prince of Persia: Lost Crown.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, like one of the early bosses of Prince of Persia: Lost Crown. So
So we're gonna
they
yeah
stole it.
we're gonna talk about this. Why don't we go ahead and do this right now? Why don't you go ahead and pull up the copycat image?
Copycat image.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I will say that right now, Adam kind of alluded to the fact that that last boss kind of looks like a boss in Prince of Persia. We're also going to look at this image right here, and what you're seeing right now is the cover image for Enotria alongside for one of the cover images for Bloodborne, and you can see. Um, they look pretty similar, don't they?
I would agree with you,
Yeah,
Dave.
they look pretty similar. And I think that's going to be one of the things that this game is going to catch a lot of slack on is that um, they are they are kind of borrowing a lot of things from other games, and I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. Um, I don't think it's a good thing either, but I mean, you could go both ways on it, right? Like if they're borrowing something that fans like, is it really going to deter people from the game? I don't know. I think there's going to be a select few people that kind of say like this game copied a lot of crap, and I'm not going to support that. But I think for the vast majority of players, I don't think it's going to matter. Do you think it's going to matter?
I think what it does is it checks a lot of boxes of a typical Souls-like game. And to me, like the way you describe your shooters, like a lot of them look the same to you. A lot of FPS shooters, every Call of Duty looks the same to you, right? That's what you've kind of said in the past.
Yeah.
To me, like Souls likes, I know there's a lot of different elements to them. They all have their different quirks and why they look different. Like Liza P looks very different to different games to me, but they all kind of have that feel and look to them. And that's kind of what this game feels like to me. It checks the boxes of a typical Souls element game. But to me, where I thought this game actually looks pretty good is the art style and the brightness of the game. Like I don't see that with too many Souls-like games, and I think that looks pretty cool. But other than that, like the mechanics seem the same, minus a few things that you'll probably talk about. But other than that, it seems like a Souls-like to me. You know, it looks like a Souls-like, talks like a Souls-like.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because I do think that it's like the aesthetic of it is very very cool and something that I've never kind of seen before, which is why I might be a little bit more excited about this game than most. Because as you talked about, the Souls franchise, Souls likes aesthetic has kind of been set in stone for a really long time, it's usually very dark. It's usually very dreary. It's very um post-apocalyptic, run down, things are in shambles kind of world. And we're not getting that in this game. We're getting a very bright, vibrant kind of setting, which is kind of cool. I've never seen it done before in a Souls like. So I'm super excited for that. And I think that this game is going to be really, really, really rich with lore. And it's supposed to be inspired by Italian folklore, which I don't know too much about. So, I mean, it's kind of cool. You can talk about like, oh, they've done like, X, Y, and Z before. I've never seen a game inspired by Italian folklore, and I don't really know much of it. So I think it's kind of cool that like, I'll be learning about these, different types, this whole different genre of folklore, or like, area of folklore that I've never been able to experience before. Fresh new stories, like fresh faces, and stuff like that. It's cool to me.
Now, so kind of going into that folklore, what does the story kind of look like?
There's actually not a lot out there about the story, and I'm kind of okay with that. You know what I mean? Like I'm excited to go in blind and not really know too much of what's going on. It's a Souls like, so I feel like they're going to develop the story just fine. I think the real like shining aspect of this game though, and you can see that because they're kind of focusing on it the most, is the masks. And I think the masks is what really kind of separates this game from other games in the series.
And I knew that was going to come up. There's some things I have concerns about the mask based off of one of the demo people, or somebody got to play the demo, and I was watching a little bit about it. So what is the mask element?
So the mask element of the game, and we saw in the trailer that the character had one mask and then did this swipe animation and it changed masks. So that's very, very important. And basically what happens with these masks is that the enemies that you fight throughout the game, there's gonna be specific main game bosses that when you defeat them, they will drop their mask and you get to collect their mask. And once you collect their mask, you now are able to like you now absorb like the abilities of that boss while you're wearing the mask. And I think the idea of it is really, really cool because they're saying that you can swap between three different loadouts with these masks, and it's going to vastly be able to change up the gameplay. And that's a big deal for Souls players because we talk about it all the time. If you're playing a Souls like, you typically want to just pick one thing and hammer it. You know what I mean? Like if you're like, okay, this character is a strength character, I am going to level up my vitality, I'm going to level up my stamina, and then I am just going to pound strength into the ground. And you never really get a chance to play the game any other way unless you either one start a new character, or two respect your build and do something completely different with your skill points. This is going to allow you to be able to play the game in a vastly different way without having to do any of that. You can stay on the same character. You don't have to worry about respecking. And I think it's a very interesting kind of way to present the game.
I think that's pretty cool. So, but here's my concern with the mask. So each mask gets a special attack, right? Like you have a power up that each mask will have these charges that you have to kind of work your way through by defeating different enemies and things like that. So what I saw in this is, yes, you have this special ability that you have to charge and special attack, but if you change your mask, you lose that charge completely. You have to start over. So like let's say you go so if you go through all the like before, like you know how like Souls likes are, you defeat all these little mini people before you get to the big boss.
Yeah.
So let's say like I don't know if this is how it's gonna work, but you're going through these at this playstyle with this mask, you're like it helps get through these enemies. But then you get to the boss, you're like, I need a different playstyle for this boss. And then you change your mask and you have to restart. Like that charge is gone. I feel like that's kind of annoying.
I didn't know that. That's disappointing. I'm not gonna lie. That's disappointing.
I don't know if that's going to be changed. That was a demo that was a while ago. Like that was a video I watched. The guy played the demo and he's like, "Yeah, that was kind of brutal. Every time I went to go fight a boss, and I changed my mask, everything was gone." So I didn't know if you saw that, but I think that's kind of frustrating and kind of a missed opportunity in terms of like I could see like losing a little bit, like you don't get the full charge if that makes sense. Because I mean that's the same with other games. You change certain things in games, but and you lose the power up. Like in Overwatch, if you change your character, you lose your power up. But I feel like that's a little different though because like it's PvP and like that makes sense. You're losing your strategy for that. But like for me, like if I'm playing a game like this and like I said, you're fighting through these mini people that requires a different strategy, and then you get to the boss and it's like, oh, well, I'm gonna change my strategy, but I lose all my progression of this
How does that progression happen though? Was he
by killing enemies.
by killing enemies? That's how you get the charge up.
And then you completely lose it is if you switch your mask.
Well, honestly, that like I'm searching for a way to defend that, but that kind of sucks. That-
And that was early on, so they could probably change that. But I feel like in a game like this, where you don't need to lose that charge completely, if that makes sense. Like I feel like that's one that I can kind of understand it. Like, oh, you should have picked better earlier, and like kind of like it's your fault for not having the right strategy going to the boss in the beginning. But at the same point, it's like I don't think I need to do that. Like I wish I can just like interchange them. Like, oh, this would be so cool. I have a charge, but I want to use this mask instead, and like use that mask.
I disagree. I disagree with you. I think it is kind of crappy that you can't switch because they're saying that you can switch, but you could fluidly switch between these three masses, which is like these three loadouts. So that's like I don't know.
That's what I mean. Like I wouldn't be able to do that and not worry about losing my progression of the charge.
Yeah, they better fix that, guys. If you see this, you better fix that.
I feel like that's frustrating.
If you gain that charge, you shouldn't lose it.
A couple other things I thought were pretty cool about this game, and I don't think I've seen this in other Souls like, but you can attest to this more than I can. The fact that those glyphs on the floor, did you see that where like you see the glyphs and you can like highlight different routes? And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. And then another thing is this power of Ardore, which I think is really, really cool. That you can dynamically like alter reality. So there, you've seen in the trailer that there was a scene of like this guy's at like this. It wasn't in the trailer we watched. It was in a different trailer, but this guy is at like the top of the cliff, and you see this like kind of magic kind of like spear kind of happen. And I think that's really, really interesting. And again, it's an idea that I think is adopted. Um, from Lords of the Fallen because we've seen that in Lords of the Fallen with having a an alternate kind of reality when you pop Umbral in Lords of the Fallen. So again, it's like another thing that was kind of borrowed, but again, I'm okay with it because it's like it's like a different way to experience the same world. And like when you pop into this alternate reality, it's like there's new puzzles, there's new secrets, like there's new ways to fight to fight battles and stuff like that if you've popped into this alternate reality. So kind of like you can almost kind of play the same areas twice when you do this. So you play it through, and then it's like, oh well, I want to play it through again and pop. Like I did that a lot when I played Lords of the Fallen. Like I would play an area, and then I'd be like, well, I want to kind of like pop Umbral and make sure I didn't miss anything. And then you like go through, and it's like you almost get like a chance to replay the same spot right then and there. So I think it's kind of cool. I think it's a very neat mechanic. Again, a borrowed mechanic, but still nonetheless neat.
One more thing, Dave, and I know you're not very strong into this part of Souls like games, but from what I saw, this game relies heavily on blocks and parries.
It does. So yeah,
Are you ready for that, Dave?
another thing that was borrowed is the posture bar. So they do have a posture bar, a lot like Sekiro, where you do need to block and parry in order to make this game work. Because a lot of things are going to rely on you breaking that enemy's posture bar. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, basically when you play Sekiro, you have two bars that you need to pay attention to. One of them is going to be a health bar, which is pretty obvious, and the other is going to be a posture bar. And the way that you interact with these enemies is number one, when you're in Sekiro, you need to figure out, is this a health enemy or is this a posture enemy? Because there's a lot of different enemies that their health bar is absolutely just ridiculously tanky, and you just kind of like slashing away at them is not going to do anything. You need to get those like perfect blocks and perfect parries to break the posture bar to have a chance against the enemy. And I think this is going to be very much the same way. I don't think that every boss in the game and every enemy in the game is going to rely on this posture bar as as much as people might think, there are going to be a lot of health based enemies that you can kind of just run in, slash, and tank. But yeah, there is going to be a posture bar focus. So I'm ready for it. If they do it like Sekiro and make it work, that's going to be just fine. I'm going to be just fine with it. But I will say that they have big shoes to fill. So if you're going to copy Sekiro, you better nail it. You better nail it, because there's nothing more frustrating than and like I say it all the time. I love hard games, but if you're gonna make a hard game, you have to make a hard game that works correctly. I don't want to feel like I'm losing because you're programming. I want to feel like I'm losing because I made a mistake. So if you're gonna copy it, you better nail it.
I'm excited to see it because I know you said that like the first time you ever played Sekiro was a big struggle for you, but then you went back. You're like, I was a champ. Like I was the boss. I knew what I was doing this time. So that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. So maybe it won't be as bad for you the next this come around for this game. So I'm glad you're excited about this one. I was a little worried that you wouldn't be, just to the fact that basically when you sent me that picture, it's like, oh, Dave's not too excited. He's seeing copycat, like I was like, so I think this game's gonna be fun for you to play. And I know we've kind of talked about in the past, like, are there too many of these types of games? And then you said there's not enough. And so you're getting your wish, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I really think we're kind of seeing like this genre just become kind of like a staple in the gaming industry, and I think it's kind of cool. It's an exciting time, especially for a player like me that just absolutely eats this stuff up. I could understand how you thought I was going to be a little salty on the game based on the image that I sent over. But like I said, I mean, it's just something that I felt like we needed to talk about, because it's definitely going throughout the community that this game is copying a lot of aspects of other games. Just to throw it out there, there is going to be chain kill incentives, so a lot like Spider-Man, where you're bouncing from enemy to enemy. I mean, so they've kind of borrowed that situation a little bit. There's going to be, a buff strategy based on the mask use. I mean, that's borrowed. We saw, the images is borrowed, the Sekiro thing borrowed. So like, I get it, guys, I get it. They definitely borrowed a lot of aspects. But they borrowed aspects of good games, then they borrowed good mechanics. So I mean, I'm not super salty on it for just borrowing something that works. It's just going to come down to execution. They got to execute.
Yeah, I guess my only fear is like, are they trying to put too much into the game? But based off of what I've seen with the trailers and the demos, I don't think so. I think they're starting to do it pretty well. I really do hope that they fix that mask mechanic where you don't lose your charge every time you switch, because that'd be kind of annoying. Or I think it'd be cool if like you charge up the mask, but when you can charge all three of them up, and if you switch and you have that full charge, you can use it. Does that make sense?
That's a great way to do it. Like, you could hold on to the charge for that mask once you get it. Yeah, that would be a fantastic way to do it.
Yeah, instead of resetting if you switch.
Yeah, because resetting it kind of sucks, and it kind of defeats the whole purpose of building the charge, right? The only way that it's gonna be helpful is on subsequent playthroughs, where that, like, okay, for this boss coming up, the best way to do it is with this mask. So I need to be wearing this mask to fight like the scrubs until I get there, so that I know that I have a charge for it, which I mean is fine, but
At the same time, like, it'd be cool to be like, "Oh, man, I'm gonna switch right now." Like, let's say you're like Ben 10, you know what I mean? Like, you're fighting a flying character, and you're like, "Well, I can't be a tiger fighting a bird, like, I have to switch to a bird, like, in the middle of the fight." You know what I mean? Like,
right.
that's kinda what I kinda describe, like, that's what I kinda think of as, like, it's like a instantaneous, like, "I gotta change what I'm doing or I'm gonna die," kinda situation, and I think that'd be kinda cool.
I think that's probably the best way to do it. So yeah, guys, if you see this, I mean, that's honestly what I feel like is probably the best way to do it. And yeah, and just real quick, I know some people are talking about the delays on this game. They're a little worried about the delays on this game, because this game was actually announced back in 2020. This game has been delayed and has been announced for a long time, but the delays on the game are actually they kind of make sense to me. So their first delay on the game was in 2022, and they delayed the game because of the release of Elden Ring, which I think was very
I think it's warranted.
I think it's very smart on their part that they delayed the game. Uh Elden Ring would have crushed them. I mean, if it dropped at the same time as Elden Ring, nobody knows what this game is. So I think they made the smart move there. And then after the delay of Elden Ring, or after the drop of Elden Ring, the next delay was they decided that they really do believe in the game. And back in 2020, they were working on Unreal Engine 5 or 4. So the next delay of the game was they decided that they were going to jump to Unreal Engine 5 and make the necessary changes there. So I think both of these delays are not like issues within the developer. I think they were both very smart delays on the developer's part. Number one, skipping the issues of, competing with Elden Ring, and number two, upgrading the gameplay and the mechanics and, all the graphics and stuff like that with the Unreal 5 engine. I think both of those were smart decisions. So I'm not super worried about the delays here. I think if anything, the delays probably made the game a lot better.